In this lesson, we're going to take a look at writing MapReduce jobs for Hadoop using C#. And what we're really going to see is how easy really that this can be using tools we're familiar with as C# developers. First, I'll launch Visual Studio 2012, just as I normally would. And I'm going to start a new project. We're going to call this Square Root. Once the project's created, we'll go ahead and use NuGet to add the MapReduce libraries. So we'll just click Manage NuGet Packages, and then here we'll search for MapReduce. We'll find here the Microsoft.NET MapReduce API for Hadoop. Of course, this is going to work with HDInsight either locally on our local workstation or using HDInsight for Windows Azure. And this introductory job, we're just going to run against our local HDInsight on a laptop. Later on, we'll do other jobs against Azure. Once those references are added, then we can fill in the details. Hadoop is based on MapReduce, and remember that map means pour through some data, evaluate it, maybe make some transformations, and then output the data one row at a time, or you can not output some of the data if you want to. Reduce means really to combine. So reduce and combine is very similar concepts. Minimally, your MapReduce job needs to have a mapper. You don't actually have to use a reducer. If the mappers are producing the output you want, you actually can just leave off the reducer. But we do need a mapper, so I'm going to paste in this stub here. And this is going to be for my square root mapper. And this MapReduce job is just to illustrate the process. All we're going to do is calculate the square root of a list of numbers that are in a text file. So this class is called square root mapper, and it's derived from mapper base. And that's really the key, is to derive from mapper base. And of course, we'll have to resolve this and bring in the right using up here at the top, you see. This is the stub routine. This is map, and this is going to receive like each line of the input data, and then it can evaluate that information and output something if it wants to, the transform data or something that's evaluated, or it can do nothing. It's optional to output that data into the map step. For the body of the map routine, we're going to do this. We're going to convert the input line that we see into an int value, and you notice there's no exception handling here. So if something goes wrong, our map job is going to fail, but this is just a kind of an academic exercise, so we know that the data will all work. So we'll take that input value and then calculate the square root of that value. When we're done, we'll actually write out what that square value was. So this map job essentially is just taking one line at a time from a text file, calculating a square root of what it finds on each line, then outputting that square root number. The next bare minimum requirement we have is to have a job defined. So this class is called the square root job, and it's derived from a Hadoop job. And notice that it is taking in that it's a square root mapper is the thing that it expects. And the body of that configure routine looks like this. There's just a couple properties that we're setting. One is just instantiating a new configuration object, and then specifying what's the input path and the output folder for the job. So where should HDFS look to find the data, where should it write the data when it's done, and then it returns that configuration. And then finally, within the main routine is where we'll kick all this off. So here we'll instantiate a Hadoop object or a connection to Hadoop, and then we'll execute that job passing in the square root job from above. So let's build that and make sure that it works. And it looks like our build is okay. But first we need to make sure that the data that we're going to read into this job, it already exists. So let's check on that. And if I want to look into HDFS, I can just run a simple list command, and I can see there is an input folder. And within the input folder, I have one folder called social media, but I don't have what this job is going to expect, which is a SQRT folder. So I'll go ahead and create that. And then I'm going to copy some data into it. And I have an input text here. And this input text just has 5 numbers, one line at a time, and you can kind of see from the code before what's going to happen with this. We'll go ahead and put this into HDFS so that the job will find it. And then if we just double check to make sure that data is there, we can see that our text file is where it's supposed to be now. And where this data will be written is into the output folder. There will be a new subfolder created for SQRT, as we can see here, and that's where that should land if everything works. So then to run this, all we really need to do from a development point of view is just hit the run button and run in debug mode. That will cause the main routine to kick off the job, and that job object is actually going to go ahead and upload all the code it needs into the Hadoop cluster and trigger it to run on the other end. So I'll just click the start button. And at this point, it's determining what dependencies need to be sent with the run code. To look at the output, I could either do that from the command line, as I've been doing before, like this, and I can see that square root has some output. And I could just fetch those files from HDSF using the get command if I wanted to. What I'm going to do instead is just go in here and look within the web browser. I can look at these files. They're reasonably small, so I'll be able to see them. And here's the first file. It has 3 numbers, and it outputted the original number and the square root. And then if I go back, there's actually a second file that has the other 2. So all 5 rows are accounted for. But even though those files are split, when I pull this data out, I could actually pull that as just the square root table, and it would combine the files, for example, in Hive or in another client. So that's it. That's really how easy it is to write a simple MapReduce program. Admittedly, this program doesn't do very much, but at least gives you kind of the sense of how you would use a complete end-to-end Microsoft stack to do MapReduce against a Hadoop system running in HDInsight.